This is HOA Karen Gets Denied. Let me set the scene in one breath. I am standing on my front lawn in Albany, New York, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, and Sharon is jabbing her finger at a bundle of fence pickets sitting on the curb. "You cannot leave trash on the street," she says, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This is illegal dumping, and I am filing a violation right now." "It is not trash," I say. "It is fence material. It has been here for 45 minutes. She pulls out her phone and snaps a photo like she is documenting a crime scene. "The rules are clear," she says. "No materials on public right-of-way. I do not negotiate with violations. I moved to Albany 6 months ago for a telecom project coordinator job that keeps me buried in spreadsheets and logs. Riverbend Community Association seemed fine at first, just another master-planned community where fences are treated like sacred law. Then I decided to replace my back fence, and Sharon appeared like a storm system. She is the finance committee lead, middle-aged, dark brown, shoulder-length wavy hair, always wearing a white cardigan and white bucket hat, and she carries a laminated rule card she waves around but never lets anyone actually read. She also has this habit of showing up with a steaming coffee cup in a gloved hand, like she is on patrol. I have a family event this weekend, and the fence contractor is supposed to start tomorrow. Missing the permit inspection this afternoon means the job gets delayed and costs me real money. Sharon knows this because I mentioned it at the last board meeting when I submitted my application. "The pickets are going in the backyard in 10 minutes, I say. The truck is coming back." She shakes her head. "Too late. I am adding this to your file. Daily fines start tomorrow, $50 per day, until you remove the materials and submit a remediation plan." I take a breath. "Sharon, the contractor will be here in less than an hour. This is not dumping." She taps her laminated card against her palm. "I can put you on the agenda and keep you there," she says. "That is a promise." That line sticks with me because it sounds like a threat with a timer attached. I decide right then that I am going to document everything. The contractor arrives 30 minutes later and moves the pickets into the backyard. I walk over to Sharon's house and knock. She opens the door with that same coffee cup in her gloved hand. "The materials are off the curb," I say. "You can cancel the violation." She sips her coffee and shakes her head. "The violation was filed the moment I took the photo. You will receive a notice by email tonight. If you want to appeal, you can submit a written request to the board within 5 business days." I go back inside and pull up the HOA rules on my laptop. The section on material storage says nothing about curb placement for active projects. It only prohibits long-term storage in driveways or front yards. I screenshot the relevant pages and email them to Sharon and the board with a polite note explaining that my pickets were there for under an hour during an active delivery. Her reply comes back in 4 minutes. The board has clarified that any materials visible from the street constitute a violation under the Aesthetic Standards Clause. Your appeal is noted, but the fine stands. I call my buddy Derek, who works as a local news tip line staffer. He tells me what documentation matters. Get photos with timestamps, he says. Get copies of every email and notice. If she is doing this to you, she is probably doing it to others. Check the HOA records for enforcement patterns. The next morning, I get an email with the formal violation notice. It lists the $50 daily fine and includes a photo of my curb with the pickets. The timestamp says 3:47 p.m., which matches when Sharon showed up. The notice also mentions that the fine resets every time I try to comply, which makes no sense. I reply asking for clarification. Sharon responds that the reset clause applies to any attempt to remediate without board pre-approval, which she says I failed to obtain. On Thursday morning, I walk outside to leave for work and find 2 orange traffic cones blocking my driveway exit. They were not there last night. I move them to the side of the driveway and take photos with timestamps. When I get home that evening, the cones are back, this time with a printed notice zip-tied to one of them that says the driveway work zone is under HOA safety review. No readable text is visible on the notice itself, but the zip tie and cone placement make it clear someone is escalating. I text Derek. He says document it and file a complaint with the management company. I do both. The management company regional rep emails back saying they will look into it, but the local rep, a guy named Phil, calls me that night and says the cones were placed by the board as a precaution due to ongoing construction concerns. What construction concerns? I ask. I am replacing a fence, not tearing down the house. Phil says he will follow up. The cones stay. Friday afternoon, I get another email from Sharon. The board has decided that your fence project requires an additional site survey to confirm property line compliance. You are required to hire a licensed surveyor within 7 days, or the project will be suspended pending resolution. I already have a survey, I reply. It was part of my permit application. Sharon writes back immediately. The board requires an independent verification. Your previous survey is not sufficient. That night, I go out to check the survey stakes along the property line. 2 of them have been moved. I know because I took reference photos when the surveyor placed them last month. The new positions are about 8 inches off. I take fresh photos with timestamps and send them to Derek. He tells me to report it to the surveyor and get a written statement confirming tampering. The surveyor comes out Saturday morning, measures everything, and writes a 1-page statement saying the stakes were relocated and the original survey is still valid. He charges me $200 for the visit. I email the statement to Sharon and the board. No reply. Sunday is the family event, a small cookout in the backyard. My brother and his kids drive up from Poughkeepsie. The fence is half finished because the contractor had to pause for the permit inspection, which I barely passed after the city inspector spent 20 minutes arguing with Sharon in my driveway about whether the setback was compliant. Sharon showed up uninvited with her coffee cup and laminated card, measuring the fence line with a tape measure she pulled from her cardigan pocket. The inspector finally told her the fence met code and left. Now my brother is grilling burgers, and Sharon is standing at the property line with her phone out, taking photos of the unfinished fence panels leaning against the back wall. Is she serious? My brother asks. She is always serious, I say. Monday morning, I get an email from Phil at the management company. The board has issued a stop work order on your fence project due to non-compliance with setback requirements. All work must cease immediately until the issue is resolved. I forward him the city inspector report and the surveyor statement. Phil replies that the board has the authority to enforce stricter standards than city code. I call him. He sounds tired. Look, he says, Sharon is pushing this hard. She added a line item to the finance report last month for enforcement consulting, whatever that means. I think she is building a case to justify her position. You need to fight this at the next board meeting. The meeting is in 2 weeks. I cannot wait that long. The contractor is already threatening to pull out because of the delays, and I have a permit inspection rescheduled for this Thursday. If I miss it again, the whole project gets pushed to next month and I lose the family event setup I planned. Tuesday afternoon, Sharon shows up at my front door with 2 guys in reflective vests. She says they are from a contractor she hired to inspect the fence and make corrections for safety compliance. I step outside and close the door behind me. You cannot send people onto my property without permission, I say. She holds up a clipboard with no readable text visible. The board has the authority to ensure safety standards, she says. These gentlemen are here to assess the situation. I pull out my phone and start recording. One of the vest guys immediately backs up. The other one looks at Sharon. Ma'am, he says, if he does not consent, we cannot go on the property. Sharon glares at me. This is obstruction, she says. I am adding this to your file. The vest guys leave. Sharon stays on my porch for another 5 minutes, lecturing me about HOA authority and compliance obligations. I let her talk because I want it on the recording. She keeps saying my name, loud and clear, which I know will matter later. Wednesday night, Derek calls me. He says he did some digging and found 3 other homeowners in Riverbend who have been hit with similar violations over the past year. All 3 involved Sharon, and all 3 involved escalating fines that reset every time the homeowner tried to fix the issue. One family ended up paying over $4,000 before they sold their house and moved. If you are enjoying this HOA nightmare, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the rules get turned upside down. I start calling the other homeowners. 2 of them agree to talk. One of them, a woman named Lisa, says Sharon filed a violation against her for a mailbox that was half an inch too tall. The fine went from $50 a day to $200 a day after Lisa replaced the mailbox, because Sharon claimed the new one was not an approved style. Lisa eventually hired a lawyer and got the fine reversed, but it cost her $3,000 in legal fees. The other homeowner, a guy named Tom, says Sharon targeted him over a driveway stain. She claimed it was an environmental hazard and demanded he repave the entire driveway. Tom refused, and Sharon pushed through a lien on his property. He ended up settling with the HOA for $1,200 just to make it go away. I take notes on everything and start building a timeline. Derek tells me to request HOA financial records under the state disclosure laws. I file the request Thursday morning. Sharon replies that the records are available for inspection at the management office during business hours, which are 9 to 11 a.m. on Tuesdays only. I take a half day off work and drive to the management office the following Tuesday. Phil hands me a 3-inch binder full of printed spreadsheets. I spend 2 hours photographing every page with my phone. Most of it is standard budget stuff, but buried in the enforcement section, I find a line item labeled Compliance Consulting that shows payments to a company called Riverbend Enforcement Solutions. The amounts are small, $200 here, $300 there, but they add up to over $6,000 in the past 6 months. I look up Riverbend Enforcement Solutions online. No website, no business listing, just a P.O. box in Albany. I text Derek. He says it smells like a shell company. I go back to the binder and cross-reference the enforcement consulting payments with the violation dates. Every payment matches a week when Sharon filed multiple violations against homeowners. The payments are always made within 3 days of the violation notices. I photograph the payment records and the violation logs side by side. That night, I get an email from Sharon. The board has scheduled a special compliance hearing for your fence project. You are required to appear next Monday at 7 p.m. Failure to appear will result in automatic denial of your permit and immediate assessment of all outstanding fines. I reply asking for an agenda and a list of the charges. Sharon writes back that the agenda will be provided at the hearing. I call Lisa and Tom and ask if they will testify. Lisa says yes. Tom says he cannot afford to get dragged back into HOA drama. I understand. Sunday night, I sit down and organize everything into a tabbed binder. Tab 1 is the original permit application and city approval. Tab 2 is the surveyor report and the statement about the move stakes. Tab 3 is the timeline of Sharon's emails and violation notices. Tab 4 is the enforcement consulting payment records. Tab 5 is Lisa's written statement about her mailbox nightmare. I also have the recording from Tuesday when Sharon showed up with the vest guys. I upload it to my laptop and label it clearly. I do not plan to play it at the hearing unless I have to, but I want it ready. Monday evening, I walk into the HOA meeting room at the community center. Sharon is already there, sitting at the head of the table with her coffee cup and laminated card. 3 other board members are there. A guy named Greg who barely looks up from his phone. A woman named Carla who smiles nervously, and another guy named Jeff who is flipping through a folder. Phil from the management company is sitting off to the side with a laptop. I take a seat across from Sharon and set my binder on the table. She glances at it and her expression tightens. Greg starts the meeting by reading a generic statement about HOA authority and compliance obligations. Then he turns to Sharon. Sharon, do you want to present the compliance issues? Sharon opens her folder and pulls out a printed copy of the violation notice. She reads it out loud, adding commentary about how my refusal to follow the rules sets a dangerous precedent for the community. She mentions the curb dumping, the survey concerns, the stop work order, and the obstruction incident with the vest guys. When she finishes, Greg looks at me. Do you have a response? I open the binder to tab 1. I submitted a complete permit application 2 months ago, I say. The city approved it. Here is the approval letter. I slide the letter across the table. Greg picks it up and skims it. Sharon leans forward. City approval is not the same as HOA approval, she says. We have stricter standards. I flip to tab 2. I hired a licensed surveyor, I say. The survey confirms the fence meets setback requirements. Here is the surveyor report and a written statement that someone tampered with the survey stakes. I slide both documents across. Carla picks them up and reads them. Her eyes widen. Someone moved the stakes? She asks. Yes, I say. After I submitted the survey, someone relocated 2 of the stakes to make it look like the fence was out of compliance. I have photos with timestamps showing the original positions and the altered positions. Sharon interrupts. That is speculation, she says. You have no proof who moved them. I flip to tab 3. I have proof of a pattern, I say. Over the past 6 months, you have filed violations against multiple homeowners using similar tactics. Here is a timeline of your enforcement actions, cross-referenced with homeowner complaints. I slide the timeline across. Greg picks it up and starts reading. His expression shifts from bored to focused. I flip to tab 4. I also have HOA financial records showing payments to a company called Riverbend Enforcement Solutions, I say. The payments coincide with your violation notices. I looked up the company. No website, no business listing, just a P.O. box. Sharon stands up. This is a witch hunt, she says. You are making accusations without evidence. I let her say my name loud because later I wanted it on the recording. That is the trump card tease I keep in my back pocket. I do not reveal it yet because I am not ready to deploy it. But I want Sharon to know I am holding something. Greg looks at Phil. Do you know anything about Riverbend Enforcement Solutions? Phil shifts in his chair. I was told it was for consulting services, he says. I do not have details. I flip to tab 5. I have a written statement from another homeowner, Lisa, who was fined over $4,000 for a mailbox violation, I say. She eventually got the fine reversed, but only after hiring a lawyer. The enforcement pattern is clear. Carla looks at Sharon. Is this true? Sharon sits back down. I enforce the rules, she says. If people do not like it, they can appeal. I slide the binder across to Greg. Everything is documented, I say. Violation notices, email threads, payment records, surveyor statements, and homeowner complaints. If you want to continue this hearing, I am happy to go through every page. Greg closes the folder in front of him. I think we need to table this, he says. We need to review the financial records and get clarification on the enforcement consulting payments. Sharon slams her hand on the table. You cannot table this, she says. He is in violation, and we need to act. Greg shakes his head. Sharon, if even half of this is accurate, we have a bigger problem than one fence. We need to review the enforcement process before we move forward with any penalties. The hearing ends 10 minutes later. Sharon storms out without saying a word. Carla stays behind and apologizes to me. She says she had no idea about the enforcement consulting payments or the pattern of selective enforcement. I drive home feeling cautiously optimistic. Derek calls me on the way and I give him the rundown. He says I need to escalate this to the regional supervisor at the management company and force a written correction. That is the next step. The next morning, I email the regional supervisor, a woman named Karen, which is ironic. I attach the full binder as a PDF and summarize the issues in a 3-paragraph email. I include the enforcement consulting payment records and the timeline of violations. Karen replies within 2 hours. She schedules a call for that afternoon. On the call, Karen is direct. She says the management company had no idea about the enforcement consulting payments. She says Sharon set up the vendor relationship without board approval and has been processing the payments through a discretionary line item in the finance budget. Karen says that is a violation of the management agreement and possibly a breach of fiduciary duty. What happens now? I ask. Karen says she is going to audit the enforcement consulting payments and the violation log. She says if the pattern holds, the management company will recommend the board suspend Sharon and reverse all related fines. She also says I should file a formal complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board. I file the complaint that night. It is a 10-page form with attachments. I include everything: the binder, the timeline, the payment records, the surveyor statements, and Lisa's written statement. 2 days later, I get a call from a city inspector. He says someone filed an anonymous complaint about my fence project, claiming it is out of compliance with setback requirements. He says he is required to do a follow-up inspection. I tell him I already passed inspection 2 weeks ago. He says he knows, but the complaint requires a response. He comes out that afternoon, measures everything again, and confirms the fence is compliant. He writes a 1-page report and hands me a copy. Whoever filed this complaint wasted my time and yours, he says. If it happens again, I am going to start charging nuisance fees. I thank him and take the report inside. I scan it and email it to Karen at the management company. That Friday, Sharon goes door to door in the neighborhood with a petition. She is trying to get homeowners to sign a statement supporting stricter enforcement standards. One of my neighbors, a retired teacher named Margaret, tells me about it that evening. She says Sharon showed up at her door with her clipboard and laminated card, talking about how I am trying to undermine the HOA and set a dangerous precedent. Margaret says she told Sharon to leave. She says she knows what happened with Lisa's mailbox, and she is not interested in signing anything Sharon puts in front of her. Sharon apparently tried to argue, but Margaret shut the door. Margaret walks over to my house after Sharon leaves and tells me the whole story. She also says 2 other neighbors refused to sign. One of them, a guy named Bill, told Sharon that if she keeps harassing people, he is going to file a complaint with the board. I thank Margaret and text Derek. He says the petition stunt is a desperation move. He says Sharon knows she is losing control, and she is trying to manufacture support before the next board meeting. The next board meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks out. Karen from the management company emails me the day before and says the audit is complete. She says the enforcement consulting payments total $6,200 over 6 months, all processed without board approval. She says Riverbend Enforcement Solutions is registered to an address that does not exist. She says the board is meeting in executive session before the regular meeting to discuss Sharon's suspension. I show up at the meeting 15 minutes early. The parking lot is full. Inside, the meeting room is packed. I recognize Lisa and Margaret. Bill is there. Tom, the guy with the driveway stain, is also there. At least a dozen other homeowners I do not recognize are sitting in the audience. Sharon is at the head of the table, talking to Greg and Jeff. Carla is sitting off to the side, looking uncomfortable. Phil is in the corner with his laptop. Karen from the management company is standing near the door. Greg calls the meeting to order and immediately announces that the board held an executive session and voted to suspend Sharon from the finance committee pending the outcome of the enforcement audit. Sharon stands up and starts yelling. She says the board has no authority to suspend her without a full vote. Greg says the board attorney reviewed the bylaws and confirmed the suspension is valid. Sharon grabs her coffee cup and laminated card and storms toward the door. On her way out, she stops in front of me. "This is your fault," she says. "I can put you on the agenda and keep you there." That line again. I smile and pull out my phone. "I have the recording from when you showed up with the contractor guys," I say. "You said my name 17 times. You also said the board has the authority to send people onto private property without consent. Want me to play it for everyone?" Sharon freezes. Her face goes red. Karen steps forward. "Sharon, I recommend you leave now," she says. "The board will notify you when the audit is complete." Sharon leaves. The room is silent for about 10 seconds. Then someone in the back starts clapping. A few other people join in. It is awkward and brief, but it feels like a release. Greg resumes the meeting. He reads a prepared statement saying the board is committed to transparent enforcement and fair treatment of all homeowners. He says the enforcement consulting payments are being reversed and all related fines are being waived. He says the board is also reviewing the violation process to prevent future abuses. Carla raises her hand. I move that we adopt a new enforcement policy requiring board approval for all fines over $100, she says. Jeff seconds it. The motion passes unanimously. After the meeting, Lisa comes over and thanks me. She says she never thought anyone would actually fight back. Margaret hugs me. Bill shakes my hand and says he is putting together a group to challenge the board in the next election. I drive home that night feeling like maybe this is over. But the next morning, I get an email from Sharon. She is still using her HOA email address. The message is short. You have not won anything, it says. I am filing an appeal, and I will see you at the state hearing. I forward the email to Karen. She replies that Sharon no longer has authority to file anything on behalf of the HOA. She says if Sharon tries to pursue this personally, it will be seen as harassment, and the board will take action. 2 weeks later, the state HOA Oversight Board schedules a hearing. I drive to the state office in Albany on a Wednesday morning. Sharon is there with a lawyer. The lawyer is young, probably fresh out of law school, and he looks nervous. The hearing officer is a middle-aged woman named Dr. Patel. She reviews the complaint and the HOA response. The response was filed by Karen on behalf of the management company. It includes the full audit report, the enforcement timeline, the payment records, and statements from Lisa and Tom. Dr. Patel asks Sharon's lawyer to present his case. The lawyer argues that Sharon was acting within her authority as finance committee lead and that the enforcement consulting payments were legitimate expenses. He says the complaints are based on selective evidence and personal grievances. Dr. Patel asks for documentation. The lawyer hands over a folder. Dr. Patel spends 10 minutes flipping through it. Then she looks at Sharon. Ms. Walker, she says, do you have any documentation showing board approval for the enforcement consulting contract? Sharon says the approval was verbal. Dr. Patel shakes her head. Under state law, contracts over $500 require written board approval, she says. Do you have any written approval? Sharon does not answer. Dr. Patel closes the folder. Based on the evidence, the complaint is sustained, she says. The enforcement consulting payments were made without proper authorization, and the violation process was applied selectively. The board is directed to issue a written correction and refund all related fines. Ms. Walker is prohibited from holding any HOA leadership position for 2 years. Sharon stands up and leaves without a word. Her lawyer follows her out. I stay for a few more minutes to get a copy of the written order. Dr. Patel hands it to me and says I should share it with the board. She also says if Sharon tries to retaliate, I should file another complaint immediately. I drive home and email the order to Greg, Carla, Jeff, and Karen. Greg replies within an hour. He says the board is scheduling a special meeting to discuss next steps. He also says Bill and 2 other homeowners have filed to run for the board in the next election. The special meeting happens 2 weeks later. The room is packed again. Greg opens by reading the state order out loud. Then he announces that Sharon has resigned from the finance committee and the board. He also announces that the board is adopting a new enforcement policy that requires independent review of all fines over $50. Carla moves that the board issue a formal apology to all homeowners affected by selective enforcement. Jeff seconds it. The motion passes unanimously. Bill stands up and announces that he is running for board president. He says his platform is transparency, fair enforcement, and community input. 2 other homeowners, including Margaret, announce they are running for board seats. The election happens in May. Bill wins the presidency. Margaret wins a board seat. Another homeowner, a guy named Steve, wins the 3rd seat. Greg and Carla stay on. Jeff resigns. At the first meeting under the new board, Bill moves to rescind the stop work order on my fence project. The motion passes unanimously. He also moves to issue refunds to all homeowners who were fined under the old enforcement process. The motion passes. I finish my fence in June. The contractor comes back and wraps up the work in 3 days. The city inspector signs off without any issues. I host another family cookout in July. My brother brings his kids again. This time, Sharon is not standing at the property line with her phone out. A few weeks later, I run into Phil at the grocery store. He says the management company terminated their relationship with Sharon after the audit. He also says Karen, the regional supervisor, implemented new policies requiring written approval for all vendor contracts and monthly audits of enforcement activity. In August, I get a letter from the HOA. It is signed by Bill. The letter says the board reviewed Sharon's stopwatch and ruler routine and found that she had been measuring fence heights and property lines with non-certified tools and then filing violations based on those measurements. The board issued a memo clarifying that all measurements must be done by licensed professionals and that homeowners have the right to challenge any measurement with an independent survey. Sharon's stopwatch and ruler routine gets mocked by the room at the next board meeting when someone brings it up during public comment. People actually laugh. In September, the HOA issues a memo clarifying the rules Sharon weaponized. The memo says that materials on the curb during active deliveries are not considered illegal dumping, and that homeowners have a reasonable window to move materials onto their property. The memo is posted on the HOA website and sent to every homeowner. In October, I get a final letter from the state HOA Oversight Board. The letter says Karen's complaint about Sharon's enforcement consulting payments was ruled unfounded with evidence cited showing that the payments were made without board approval and that the vendor did not exist. The letter also says Sharon is prohibited from serving on any HOA board in the state for 2 years. In November, I get an email from Bill. He says a group of homeowners has filed a recall petition against the last remaining member of the old board, a guy named Roger who rarely attended meetings and rubber-stamped everything Sharon wanted. The petition succeeds. Roger resigns. A new board member, a woman named Diane, is appointed to fill the seat. The board holds a town hall in December. Bill announces that the new board is committed to fair enforcement, transparent budgets, and community engagement. He also announces that the HOA is launching a review of all outstanding violations to identify any other cases of selective enforcement. At that town hall, someone asks what happened to Sharon. Bill says she moved out of Riverbend in October. He says he does not know where she went, but he hopes she learned something from the experience. I do not know if she learned anything, but I know I did. I learned that HOAs can be weaponized by people who care more about power than community. I learned that selective enforcement is real and it destroys lives. I learned that the only way to fight back is with documentation, persistence, and a willingness to escalate when necessary. I also learned that a board election challenge can flip the power dynamic, that resignations can cascade, and that new leadership can take over before the next project gets targeted. That is exactly what happened in Riverbend. Sharon is gone. The old board is gone. The enforcement consulting scam is gone. The stopwatch and ruler routine is a punchline now. And the fence that started this whole nightmare, is standing solid in my backyard, exactly where it is supposed to be. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.